Hi, and welcome to Let's Talk About War Games, the podcast where we do that thing that I just said. Today's going to be a little bit different from our normal episodes because it's not just Joe and I today. We have on Morgane Gouyon-Rety, who came to talk to us about her recent games that she has designed and her experiences in the wargaming community or the conflict simulation community. We'll talk about that later, as a woman who recently came out as trans. So, without too much further ado, I will kick it off to me, but a little while ago when we recorded this. Thank you. So, thank you for joining us here today for Let's Talk About War Games. Would you mind, just to kick us off, just give us a little introduction about yourself and tell us a little bit about the games that we might know you for?
All right. Hello, Joe and Jack. So my name is Morgane Gouyon-Rety. I got one released game design, which is Pendragon, the Fall of Roman Britain, which is in the coin series at GMT Games, which was released in December 2017. I currently have a second design, which is on P500, Hubris, on the twilight of the Hellenistic world. So that's basically the last 55 years of the great Hellenistic kingdoms and the rise of Rome. Apart from that, I am French. I live in Montreal with my wonderful wife and children, and I am basically a senior manager in engineering for my, getting actually the family sustained.
Yeah, the very difficult world of war game design, right?
Right now, it's it's just a hobby that takes an awful lot of time, but also provides a lot of satisfaction. So,
Yeah, I gotta say, I've taken a look at both Hubris and Pendragon. Funnily, I had heard of both actually before we even talked about this, and it's just kind of funny how it ended up working out this way. I was like, oh, this looks kind of neat, and then we ended up talking. So funny how things come full circle.
excellent.
Yeah, Hubris specifically. I mean, I don't remember too many games about post Alexander Hellenism before Rome became super huge. So definitely looking to at some point in the future. Hopefully, I'd like to pick those up.
It definitely might be on the list.
Yeah, definitely. Just wanted to ask, what does your career look like for you to become a game designer?
Well, I don't know if it would. I mean, career is probably a strong word. I've been a fan of history and I've been a fan of games for pretty much as long as I can remember. So I think I had my first war game when I was 10, which it's quite a long time ago. But anyway, and so like all players, I guess I have dabbled with house rules and working on my own design and ideas for forever. I've got I guess a couple of shelves in my cabinets full of design ideas, which maybe someday I will revisit. But then the big step for me was back in 2013. I was then living in the San Francisco Bay Area in California, and so not too far from the GMT headquarters. I, for some reason, I came up with this idea of designing Hubris, which was actually my first design concept. And for some reason, instead of just staying, in basically in my mind or with some notes, I started building a prototype. And then having it played around by some friends, getting feedback, making it better, to the point where I actually felt confident enough to go and present it to GMT on the occasion of one of their GMT weekends in the fall of 2013. and to be honest, I mean, the initial, I mean, there was some interest, but not overwhelming interest. I mean, obviously, I was a completely unknown quantity, and so we sort of talked about it. But I still made a number of contacts, and then the next year, I had been involved with some of the playtesting of the coin games, and I had started thinking that the coin engine might be a good system to design a game I had in my mind forever about the fall of Roman Britain. So what essentially became Pendragon, and so when Gallic, at the time it was called the Gallic War, so what is Falling Sky now, was announced, and I understood that the coin system was not going to be confined to the modern world. I actually talked about it with Mike Bertuccelli, who was the series developer at the time. And he said, hey, that might be interested. And next thing I know, I had an email from Volko Runke asking me for details. And so that's how it all began, really. And so the summer of 2014 went in a haze, because I was helping with the Falling Sky design, which was actually the reason for my call in the first place. And then at the same time, trying to develop Pendragon. So it all went pretty fast from there. And then there was a huge interest with Pendragon, and Volko was backing it. And so I put Hubris on the shelf for a couple of years. And we did Pendragon, and Pendragon was, reasonably successful. And so as soon as Pendragon was ready, and went to the art department and was done, GMT actually let me know that they were interested in Hubris from that point, because I guess I had kind of demonstrated that I was able to, to complete a design, which is a big thing for them. We all have ideas. I guess game design ideas are really 15 to the dozen, and but actually being able to go through all the tedium of developing it, and completing it, and writing everything, and getting everything proved is quite something else. And so I guess I proved that I was able to do it, and at that point, it's a different conversation.
That's really fascinating, because I was curious why it was a coin design. And actually, I guess I have a bit of an off-script question, but did you find it difficult trying to conform your design ideas to an already constructed system, or is that a helpful part of it?
I found it helpful because I had this sort of game engine that I could reuse, and so a lot of things were already established. So obviously I tweaked it a lot, and obviously having a direct line to the the designer of the whole series was helpful, but quite often I would do something which was completely different from the usual coin standards. And I would suggest that to Volko, and he was like, "Oh, yeah, it's a good idea. Okay, good." And so I could go forward. So I never felt like it was a constraint. On the other hand, it was a good basis from which to work. And then I could focus on actually developing the specific aspects that I wanted to put in the design. In my mind, the coin series, it's an engine. It's just like CDGs or Cheat Pool or You Go, I Go, whatever. So there's no reason. It's not a constraint. It's a good tool to build a model for certain situations. Basically, whenever you've got asymmetric warfare, multifactional, that sort of things. And that's how I came to think that it was a good engine for the late Roman period, because that's what it was, multifactional and asymmetrical.
It's nice to hear that you had so much encouragement from Vocal Ruin or from the GMT team when you were doing this too.
Right. I mean, I'm on record, like many others, to say that Volko is a wonderful person, and in many respects. But yes, I mean, it started with me basically calling up a common friend saying, "Hey, if you need help with, developing or testing Falling Sky," I mean, being French and being interested in the ancient history, obviously the Gallic War was a big draw to me. And then he, hearing that I had some concept, I mean, at the time there was absolutely nothing. I think there must have been like 2 pieces of paper with the very basic framework of what the faction would be and what the main, bones of contention and relationships would be. And Volko then, said, "Tell me more." and so, and then it's a matter of, "Oh, I will be in San Francisco on that day. Could you show me a prototype?" And I'm like, "Okay, I've got 6 weeks to build the prototype." That sort of thing. But yes, Volko has been definitely tremendous support, both in terms of getting the project started and getting traction, and then helping, obviously, with first as a sounding board for ideas and concepts, and then he took a more direct role in developing the game in the second stage of the project. So, yeah, huge help.
That's great to hear. I want to say it is interesting how well the coin system seems to work with Pendragon, considering it's an asymmetrical model, but I don't think that when they built the system they had something like this in mind. So it's really interesting to see how you use it in this manner.
Most definitely not. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. But
going from Cuba Libre to
yeah, but for a long time I thought that maybe they would not be interested in getting the coin system out of the modern era or the near-modern with Liberty or Death was being announced. So to me, it was really when I saw Falling Sky, being announced, that I was like, hey, okay, so they're ready to explore some wider implication, which I thought the game engine was very well suited for, but I didn't know, from a branding point of view, from whatever, if they were ready to go that route. But I found them extremely open to suggestions. So, and we've seen the system being pushed, to very different ideas since, and I think we will keep seeing new ideas being pushed, and just demonstrating the versatility and the flexibility of this engine. I myself have a couple of design ideas which I think will break some more new ground for the coin series.
Ooh. Do you want to share that with us, or is that still under wraps?
Oh no, it's not under wraps. It's still very preliminary. I think I had the opportunity to talk about it a little bit, but I'm looking at applying this to a mostly political situation with very little actual fighting, even though there might be some. So basically, faction politics within a city during again the ancient Hellenistic period.
Ooh,
That's super intriguing. I don't remember the name of it, but there was a game that came out recently. I think it dealt with American electoral politics that used a wargaming model to model the various political parties, quote unquote, fighting each other for influence. I think it was for American electoral politics. I don't remember what it was exactly. It was brought up in Wargamers retrospective for last year. I don't remember what it was, but I know that there was something along those lines, but it was in a very modern standpoint. So it's interesting to hear that you're covering something like this in an ancient's perspective.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'm more familiar and I guess more comfortable with that period, which I know much better. But but yes, I do think that I like to use the word conflict simulations rather than war games, because I think not because I'm ashamed of war games, but because I think conflict simulation is a richer and broader term. And so whenever you include political, social, cultural, religious dimensions, you can have some very interesting conflicts, and the actual fighting element, the kinetic conflict, might be fairly secondary to the main conflict, and still being absolutely relevant from a historical conflict simulation point of view.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. And that you're the first person that I've heard use that term, but I think I like that a lot, especially relative to things that kind of toe the line between a grand strategy mindset and a wargaming mindset.
Correct. Yes, and I'm not the. I claim absolutely no property of this term. I think Harold Buchanan is the first I've heard use that term. I don't know if he came up with it, but it's something which I think is very appropriate. Especially, you're right. I mean, when you go, the higher scale you go, the more you go into the strategic and the grand strategic, and the more you have to include other dimensions, and it does make a lot of sense to do that. I mean, compared to if you go down to the tactical, sub-tactical scale, obviously that's much less relevant, but not necessarily entirely irrelevant, I guess. But and it's a good thing because many people actually may not have much interest in fighting from foxholes or trenches or whatever, but are interested in looking at the bigger picture and how the various facets of a conflict play together. And I do believe that it's interesting to, I guess, not be part of this war game tag, which may, be something of a turn off for some people.
Yeah, we were actually discussing this as a subject for a future episode, but just how conceptually war games can be a little bit of exclusionary to some people for a few reasons. But I think even the name might be doing some of the work.
I think so. Yeah, I do think so. And then it's. There's been a lot of discussion recently about some of the awards and some of the categories which are being used there. But in my opinion, it's okay. A war game, is it a game about war? I mean, it's a very broad definition. I mean, many games about war, I think, would not qualify as war games as far as I'm concerned. So I do like, conflict simulation to be a much more precise term in this regard. At the same time, as I said, I mean, I do believe that comparing games which are tactical in nature and games which are, strategic or doesn't make that much sense. I mean, it's the mechanism, the drivers, I would say even the main pros and cons are hugely different. I mean, you can enjoy both. I mean, I'm not saying they are antinomic, but they're not the same thing.
Yeah, I know here on our podcast and our blog, we use the broadest definition of war game possible, so we can talk about whatever games we want to talk about, really. But
yeah,
I think I'm with you in terms of organizing it more succinctly, so people know what they're getting into and can, better understand what each game might want to try and do.
Someone asked me the other day if I would consider Age of Empires a war game, and I was like, I guess, kind of. It's not something that I think would fall into the traditional label, but I got a lot of the same concepts, same ideas.
But
so
again, according to my definition, it wouldn't, because I'm looking at a historical conflict simulation. So Age of Empires is not,
right.
It's not simulation. It's barely historical.
Yes.
So
definitely.
it wouldn't. But then it's a game about war. So why not? I mean, I'm definitely anyone who enjoy playing that game should feel completely legitimate playing it. But
yeah, there's a big difference between that and something like Advanced Squad Leader or something. It's definitely not the same kind, but is it there a little bit? Maybe. That's the conversation we were having.
But then again, I mean, if you compare, say, Advanced Squad Leader, which is, definitely a war game, and a game like, I will not mention Pendragon because I know some people will actually not consider it a war game, but say a grand strategic game like, I don't know, Thunder in the East, right? I mean, these games are completely different, completely. And then if you are like, I don't know, Here I Stand or Virgin Queen, which games which include a ton of different facets. I mean, religious, cultural, literature, ton of things like this. I mean, again, between Virgin Queen and Advanced Squad Leader, there's not much in common, to be honest with you.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not.
Yeah, so I guess it's interesting to think more about, like, do we just class these games that are historical themed and then break it down further? Because, like, I would be happy to say, yeah, sure, Age of Empires is a war game, but I would not call Age of Empires a conflict
Right,
simulation.
right, right.
All right, so
Well,
Jack, let's get back to back on track. Eh?
yeah, this is kind of that wasn't part of what we were originally talking about, but I think we're having a lot of very interesting discussions
Sorry
here.
for wit tracking you.
No,
No.
this is very engaging stuff.
Yeah,
I like this a lot. Yeah, don't apologize. This is really good stuff
Yeah,
that
it's
we're talking about here.
part of the conversation I want to have on this channel, so I'm glad we're having them.
Yeah, definitely. The next question we had for you is, how do you feel that coming out as trans has affected your work as a game designer, if it has at all, and have you noticed any kind of reaction from people in the community about it?
Well, I would say, and I'm probably, I reckon that I'm fairly lucky in my transition, that generally
Sure.
speaking, I've been extremely, well received very positively from, like 99% around me, including in the game community. So, so take that with that sort of grain of salt. But I would say it hasn't affected my standing, I would say, as a designer that much. I know that, I was worried about it, obviously, like I was worried about
Sure.
pretty much everything before coming out. But so the first few persons I came out to, in the community were, close friends like Volko or Harold. And they were instantly extremely supportive. Actually, Harold at the time was pressing me to do to be on his podcast, and I was okay, why not? But then I was going through a pretty difficult time, so. And then at some point he came back and pushed, and that was right at the time when I was finally um, getting to grips with it and be ready to own up to it and come out. And so I gave him a call and I said, well, I would be very honored, but you've got to know something before you agree to do that. And I didn't know what to expect. And he actually said, well, I wanted you on the podcast before. Now I will absolutely want you on the podcast. Okay. So that was good. And then I wrote an email to Gene Billingsley, so the boss of GMT, because again, I first thing I wanted to be entirely transparent, and I was concerned there might be potentially, some negative backlash against the game, against so Pendragon, which was at the time I think had been released 6 or 7 months probably. And then GMT, and I wrote to Gene in that mindset, and he had an absolutely tremendous answer. Actually, I called it up on my screen because I just wanted to share. Well, he pledged they would be supportive, etc., and he appreciated my concern, etc., about potential backlash. But please know that I care much more about you and your happiness as a person than I could ever care about a game. So we will work with you to deal with any issues if they occur and join you in hoping that people in general will be understanding, kind, and respectful of your journey.
That's pretty tremendous for a response for that.
Yes, exactly. So yes, so definitely, there's been absolutely no, and everybody at GMT when I did come out was answered in kind. And so there's been nothing but tremendous support and in that regard. Now, did it impact the sales of Pendragon? I don't know. I wouldn't think so, but I can't know, obviously. Did it impact, when, well, actually, probably the biggest impact was not so much the transition itself, but or rather in a positive way, because I guess when I was working, when, as I mentioned at very early on, being a game designer is a pretty intense, occupation,
Hmm.
and so I realized that for a long time, I was so taken, and I may actually have used that work to sort of, push away some issues which were becoming more and more difficult to deal with. Uh, so that when Pendragon was ready, it all came back. And initially, I was thinking that Hubris would probably be ready for P500 shortly thereafter. There was a couple of things I wanted to change, etc. But actually, I went through a fairly convoluted existential crisis then, and so that delayed things quite a bit. But at the moment when I actually accepted myself fully and came out, it's like a huge weight came off my mind, and actually within a month I was back to the, to working on Hubris, something which I had essentially not been able to do for a number of months before. So no, the impact has been fairly minimal. We went, so when I said the game was ready, finally, I had a couple presentations done, especially in San Diego, a couple other conventions. The welcome was very warm, and then started to have some buzz going on in social media. People were looking for Ibris, and when we announced finally that the game was on P500 last year, I think it went through to 500 pre-orders fairly quickly, something like, I don't know, 5-6 weeks. So very happy with that. I really, again, I know there are, some people are probably not too happy, but then at the same time, people who are really interested in the theme and in my approach to gaming, I guess, are interested and, do not care whether I'm a man or a woman, right? And this is how it should be.
Hmm. It's such a nice, affirming story from the community, from the business side of it. I'm happy to hear that it turned out that way.
Yeah. The point is, you know, I'm not an established game designer by any means, but I had one design which had been released before and which had been well received. So that was a foundation which existed prior to my transition. And I would say, just like in my professional career, same thing. I had, you know, the downside of having taken so long to actually come to grip with my identity was that I had had time to lay the foundation for my career, just like I had laid the foundation for my designing career. So I don't know what would have been the reaction if I had, sort of approached GMT for the first time, and GMT or any other company, being trans. I don't know. I tend to think that it would probably not have been different, but that's something we need to qualify. It was easier, obviously, for people to keep trusting me than to start trusting me, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. It's really nice to hear that GMT has been so welcoming and accepting for you, especially because that's not necessarily the norm, even just in wargaming, but in our community in general. Uh, it can be a bit rough. My partner is trans, and I've seen him in online games run into trouble because openly identifies, like part of his username for a while was just trans. So people would just harass him over it. And, it's nice to hear that from part of the gaming community that you had a very positive experience with this.
I like to say that there are stupid people everywhere. So, in every community, including the trans community, Anyway, yeah. But I mean, there is no denying that the trans people in general have been subject to a lot of hate and abuse for for no other reason than just being who we are. So I mean, I would be lying if I were saying I have not been exposed to any of that in the gaming community, just like I may have been exposed to that in other communities. But it's not been, we know that there are some, uh, subjects we've seen recently, a couple initiatives trying to promote diversity, trying to basically point out that we may have an issue in the gaming community with just the lack of diversity and the underrepresentation of some groups and some of biases and sometimes some jerks basically reacting like jerks to just because of there's a woman saying something or someone who identifies or is identified as LGBT. But thankfully, they are vocal, but they are very much a minority, I believe. So, yeah, I've run into some of these issues, but not to the point where I think it has impacted me either as personally or as a designer.
That's really good to hear.
Some of those more vocal proponents or people who are antagonistic to ideas, like trying to get more diverse voices in wargaming and all that, it's that kind of thing that spurred us to like, okay, let's really try and dig into the community here and see how people have experienced this, because of how ridiculous some people can be when people try and push these good initiatives. But it's encouraging to hear that on the human side of things, dealing with a company like GMT, that they did the right thing.
Well, GMT has been stellar, no question about that.
It certainly sounds like, because you're definitely in the tabletop wargaming aspect of things, that I think that something that we have found in the last years in general is that it's a lot easier to be mean to someone online than it is to someone in person. And since tabletop gaming is a very much more present and physical activity, it sounds like the community there is a lot more welcoming, because online it's a lot easier to just hide behind your computer and say something mean.
No doubt, no doubt. But then at the same time, I mean, the tabletop gaming, just like pretty much everything else in the world, has definitely gone online for the past year or so. And then it's a very lively community through through Facebook and Twitter and some other medium,
Right.
Discord. So that trolls could definitely do the same thing, and some do, and hide behind their keyboards and screens, no question about that. But I would say, as often is the case, the amount of noise and the amount of disruption and disturbance that jerks have is usually completely out of proportion with their real numbers, simply because most people just don't care or so you tend to hear the dissenting voices much more than you hear the majority. Um, but what I find very encouraging is that quite often when there have been these sort of debates, or if we want to call that nicely, there's been usually quite a strong support from a lot of people who are not directly involved and basically telling jerks, stop being jerks or just get out. And that's the way. I mean, because at the same time, when we hear some calls about, well, we should avoid entirely any subject which might be touchy because some of us might feel, uneasy or unwelcome, or blah blah blah. And my personal position is, if you're a jerk, I mean, I'm not interested in you hiding, but you're a jerk. I mean, you are a jerk. I mean, deal with it. The way not to be called a jerk is to not be a jerk. So work on yourself and stop being a jerk. That's kind of my attitude. But a lot of people seem, I think, to be to be supportive and to be I don't want to use necessarily the term allies, but at least to be decent people who don't want to let jerks take over these groups. And probably because they, first, thankfully, perceptions have been improving about the LGBT community, or about um, the place of women and things like that, or persons of colors. The other thing is that I think many people just understand that diversity is a good thing, because it will bring, more players, more designers, new perspectives, new games, new subject matters, and most of us like it. Most of us understand that, an initiative like the Zenobia Award, its main aim is to strengthen the community and have, new designers, new games, new ideas available to all of us to enjoy. So, of course, if you are very conservative in your gaming views, at least, and you believe that any game which is not on the Bulge, on Waterloo, or Gettysburg is not worth your time, then you're not interested in any more new subjects, I guess. But most people are not like this. I think most people are interested in seeing, new periods, new subjects, new approaches, and so understand that bringing more people to the table is a good thing.
Yeah, definitely. And that's something that we were really excited about. Joe and I were both actually looking at the Zenobia Awards ourselves a while before this came out. I myself am bisexual, and so we were like, you know what? Let's take a look at it. But unfortunately, we ended up not being able to submit anything to it ourselves. But as a community award and an initiative, it does seem to really be pushing for a nice influx of new talent into the wargaming field, because it's something that we had talked about before, is that wargaming is to an extent kind of a graying hobby. Some of these legendary designers are getting older, and after a while they're not going to be making any games anymore. And so bringing in new talent, bringing in people who have new ideas of current topics, or new ideas about topics that aren't present in wargaming at all, very much. Pendragon is a great example. A coin module, but in Roman era Britain, that's something that I don't think we would have seen 10, 15, 20 years ago. That's very interesting. And, having new blood coming into the field like this is exciting, I think. For it should be exciting for all wargamers, I think.
Exactly, and the main reason you wouldn't have seen that game is because until Volko actually introduced the coin engine with Andean Abyss, these subject matters were completely shunned in many ways from the main wargaming community. I mean, you had some designers like Brian Train and others trying to do that, but who could not get any sort of traction, unfortunately. And Volko basically demonstrated that it was possible to have interesting games depicting new types of conflicts which so far have not been covered, in a way which was approachable, which was easier to get into for people maybe coming from the non-traditional wargaming groups, and then him being so open and to new ideas and new designers, then transform what was already a groundbreaking initiative into something which he himself, quite often say, well, I never envisaged and it would become what it has become. So Volko at the time was a newcomer. I mean, and he's not that young. Pardon me, Volko, but I'm not that young either. But yeah, he was a newcomer, and he brought some new concepts and some new innovation. But some of these he borrowed from Euro games or other. Some of those he came up with entirely, and that's what we want to see. And yeah, when I was approached by Volko and Harold, who are the originators of the Zenobia Award initiative, what really sold me was, to be honest, Volko and Harold coming to me saying, would you be interested in helping? My answer was probably going to be yes anyway. but what really sold me was that it's not so much about awarding a prize or saying prize money or something. It's about developing new talent. So the mentoring aspect is huge in the Zenobia initiative, and as far as I'm concerned, that's actually what makes the value of the initiative. Because even in a different way, you had the Consim game jam, which took place a couple of months ago, and these had no particular target with regard to underrepresented groups or something, but it brought new designers and to the fore, and a lot of that is just getting remarked and then getting some support and mentoring and help. And now, I mean, you may have seen the GMT update today. We have a second game coming out of this jam, which is going on P500. And I happen to know that it will not be the last. So that's the kind of initiative which helps, because, I mean, as we mentioned when I was describing my own start in designing, I mean, if I had not had the contacts which I built from being close to Hanford, and then from getting, basically the eye of Volko and getting his support, I mean, I would never have gotten anywhere. So
yeah, I'm very excited to see those games popping up on the P500 now, because I remember that the event happening and seeing that the very interesting ideas coming out of there.
Oh yes. But back to the Zenobia Award, I think the period for application is over. We are actually busy reviewing, doing a first pass just to check, who is qualifying, etc. Before we do any kind of selection based on merit. And I don't want to disclose any any information which is confidential, but I can tell you that it was extremely gratifying to see the number of applications that we receive, and the overall, there's a lot of quality application, an awful lot of quality applications. So again, I mean, I have no idea what will come out of this, but I'm confident there will be some great games and some new great designers coming out of this, and that's the purpose. And so, if you guys are interested, I mean, I'm sure there will be other editions, so don't despair.
Mm-hmm. It's so good to hear that it's doing exactly what it's supposed to be doing. That's really encouraging.
Well, I mean, it's only the beginning. I mean, now, we've got to deliver on the intentions. I trust that this will be the case. I mean, there's a tremendous amount of both, competencies and goodwill and energy in the board and among other people who have agreed to be mentors. So I'm confident that we will be able to deliver. But until we have done so, it's still only a promise. But yeah, I'm confident we will do it.
I have every confidence in you all.
We're very confident in your confidence.
Did you have any more questions, Jack, do you think, or
not really. Just, if there's anything that you want to plug here, say go buy my games or anything like that, now would be the time.
I mean, sure. I mean, people are always welcome to at least go and check them out. No, but generally speaking, I mean, I think that ours is a great hobby, and it would be a shame, indeed, if it were to die out, because there would be no new blood coming, and no new. And this includes new designers and new ideas and new approaches. I mean, anyone who knows my games will know that I am not of the school of thought that a game should be, very easy and should be played under an hour or two. I mean, I like deep, involved games with a lot of depth and a lot of strategy. And I do hope that we will that these new approaches and this new design will still have some room for deeply involved simulations. but at the same time, I mean, we do need some new approaches, and we do need some new subjects. That includes people coming from all kind of backgrounds. I mean, and part of that is actually from different cultural backgrounds. I mean, I'm the first to, again, I mean, I like to try new ground, to break new ground. I mean, I don't think there was anything like Pendragon before in terms of the subject matter, and I'm pretty confident there was no game like Hubris before either. And I fully intend that many of my next designs will also be breaking new ground, because basically my criterion to design a game is that I would like to play a game, and that game doesn't exist, so I end up designing it. That's the way I go after it. So I'm not particularly interested in just the 10,001 game on the Battle of the Bulge, or the 6,700 on Gettysburg, even though I do own a couple of Gettysburg and Bulge games. But I think it is I'm dying to see what people from, say, Eastern Europe, from North Africa, the Middle East, Asia, Australasia, South America, I mean, basically from anywhere can bring us. And again, I mean, I must recognize that, I'm French. I've lived essentially in Western Europe and Northern America. So I guess my knowledge and my centers of interest tend to lie with cultures and history from, Europe and the Western world in general. But then sometimes, I mean, you find a subject matter and you're just fascinated by something which happened in, I don't know, Korea or or South India or things like that. And I would like to see more of that. At the same time, I think that having designers from these parts of the world bringing these perspectives, I mean, it doesn't matter if I personally, Morgane, I'm not interested in these games. But if these games are of interest to, thousands, millions, I don't know, of people who are more familiar, more intimate with this culture, that's great. Because, the more, again, I mean, the more people you bring to the table, the more new ideas and the most, cross-pollination and stuff you get, I mean, the more interesting stuff we will see. And we can all only benefit from that. It's definitely not a finite pie. I mean, anyone bringing new concept and new approaches just makes it a bigger pie. And I should be under no obligation to try and like every part of the pie, but I should definitely find something by having a bigger pie. I'm more likely to find something I like, or something I never heard of and which I will find I like, just like food or.
It's a wonderful way to put it.
Okay, so.
But yeah, for our listeners, what you need to do is go to gmt.com, and there's a tab that says P500, and you're going to find Hubris, Twilight, A Hellenistic World, and you're going to P500 that.
or not. There are tons of other games.
Or not, come around too. But if you do
yes.
the P500 pre-order, you are supporting the developers and getting the game made, and you get it for a discount.
Indeed.
It's like a win-win-win. It's like a three-way win. It's great.
Mm-hmm.
Go do that. We'll post links to both Hubris and Pendragon in the comments for this one.
Well, thank you. Much appreciated.
Yeah, definitely. We really appreciate you having you on. You've been a great guest on here. Very interesting to talk to. We've had this has been a great episode, I'd say.
Yeah, we really appreciate your time. Really appreciate getting your point of view on all of this. It's been really enlightening to talk to someone who's been in the trenches of game design for a while and see their take on it.
Well, I'm excited. I mean, many people describe this as the second golden age of war games. I'm very excited by everything that happens, and pleased to be a small part of it. But I mean, just like everybody else, I guess it's hard to keep up with all the great games which come out.
Definitely.
In terms of playing them, but and being a designer, I mean, by the way, just one bit of advice for would-be designers: if you're planning on playing a lot of games. Don't become a designer because you won't have much time to do that. No, I mean seriously, it's a great time to be to play historical consim games, and it's a fun time to be a designer as well.
Perfect. Well, again, thank you so
Yeah.
much for coming on and joining us. Love chatting with you. I'm sure listeners will love it too. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Joe. Thank you, Jack.
Thanks a ton.
Anytime. Take care.
Take care.